the woman in aisle 9. I worked at a Walmart just outside of Tempe, Arizona, on the overnight restocking crew. We called it the graveyard shift, which always felt appropriate, even before things got weird. I started the job during my second semester of college. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than most other part-time jobs, and I liked how quiet the store got after closing. No impatient customers, just the hum of fluorescent lights, the occasional walkie-talkie chatter, and the rhythmic thunk of stocking boxes. That night started like any other. It was mid-July, and the desert air was still clinging to the heat from the day before. We clocked in around 10 p.m., and by midnight, the floor was ours. We were about 5 people total that night. Angela in home goods, Mason in produce, Jorge working the back room, me in dry grocery. Our supervisor, Marla, drifted between us. My section was the center aisles, chips, canned goods, cereal, all that. I'd done it so many times I could stock shelves without looking. Around 2:45 a.m., I had just finished a pallet of ramen noodles and was cutting open a box of granola bars when I noticed someone standing at the end of aisle 9. A woman, pale, still. She was just far enough away that I couldn't make out much detail. Her back was to me, and she didn't move. Just stood there, facing the soup shelf. Now technically, the store's doors lock at midnight. No customers. We're instructed to call security or management if we see anyone wandering around, just to be safe. But sometimes late-night stalkers would let in their spouses or friends through the employee entrance for a quick visit. It wasn't unheard of. Still, something about her posture made me uneasy. Her arms were stiff by her sides, and her head was tilted at a strange angle, like a confused dog, but just wrong somehow. I stepped out of the aisle and looked both ways down the stretch of fluorescent-lit rows. Nobody else. "Ma'am," I called out. "Can I help you?" She didn't move. I hesitated, then started walking toward her slowly. The sound of my work boots echoed on the linoleum. As I got closer, I noticed her clothes looked outdated. A long brown dress with puffed shoulders. Not vintage cute, more like 1970s drab. Her hair was flat, parted in the middle. No purse, no phone. Just standing there, staring at the soup cans. I was maybe 15 feet behind her when she finally moved. She turned, not fast, not slow, just fluidly. Her head rotated first, like an owl, until her pale face was visible in profile. Then the rest of her body followed. Her eyes locked on mine, big, glassy, too wide. And there was something wrong with her mouth. It didn't hang naturally. It was smiling, but not with joy. It was stretched, forced. I stopped in my tracks. "Are you okay?" I asked, softer this time. Then she whispered something. It was so faint I almost thought I imagined it. I took a step closer, just one, and she suddenly backed away. Her limbs moved like they were resisting her, like they didn't quite belong to her. Her heels scuffed the floor, and she disappeared around the corner of the aisle. I followed instinctively, turning the corner within seconds, only to find the aisle empty. No woman, no footsteps, nothing. My stomach dropped. There was no way she could have run off that fast. I checked both ends of the adjoining aisles. Silent. Empty. I walked to the break room where Mason was taking his break, eyes glued to his phone. "Dude," I said, trying to sound casual. "Did anyone let a customer in? Woman in a long brown dress." He didn't even look up. "Nope. Doors are locked. You seeing ghosts again, man?" I didn't laugh. I headed to the front and found Marla. She was sitting at the manager's kiosk, entering data into a tablet. "Hey, weird question," I said. "Have you seen anyone walk in recently?" There was a woman in aisle 9. Looked wrong. She gave me a raised eyebrow. "Nope, nobody. Cameras would have picked it up if someone got in." I asked her to rewind the CCTV feed for that section. We watched it together. I pointed at the moment I saw the woman, but on the footage, nothing. Just me, cutting open a box, standing, looking, talking to thin air, walking forward, pausing, then turning the corner into an empty aisle. I felt cold sweat break out on my back. "Maybe take a break," Marla said, clearly unsettled but trying not to show it. I did. I sat outside the loading dock, trying to tell myself I was tired, imagining things. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. 3 nights later, I was stalking again. This time, I stayed alert. I avoided aisle 9 until I had no choice. At 3:07 a.m., I entered the aisle. There she was again. Same dress, same stiff stance. This time, closer. She stood between the canned vegetables and pasta sauce. Her face was clearer now under the flickering lights. The smile still stretched unnaturally across her pale cheeks, and this time I could see that her eyes weren't just wide. They were dry, no blinking, just huge glinting marbles. And she was mouthing something. No sound. I slowly took out my phone and snapped a photo. The flash went off accidentally. She vanished, just blinked out of existence, like turning off a light. I sprinted out of the aisle, breath shaking. I ran to the break room and checked my phone. The photo was black, not dark. Black, solid void. I didn't finish the shift. I stopped working overnight for a while, swapped to mornings. But curiosity's a cruel thing. About a month later, I brought it up to Angela. She'd worked there almost a decade. Her eyes went dark. "You saw her?" she asked. I didn't answer, just nodded. Angela told me the store was built in the late 80s, but before that, the land had been part of an old trailer park. One of the trailers had caught fire one night, faulty heater or something. A single mother and her daughter had lived there. The daughter died in the blaze. The mother made it out. But she went missing a few weeks later. Only thing left behind was her dress, scorched brown fabric found at the edge of the burn site. Guess what color it was? Yeah, brown. Angela said the old-timers claimed that sometimes, after 3 a.m., she wandered the aisles. Never spoke, never screamed, just watched. And the part that really chilled me? She was always seen in aisle 9, the aisle where years ago they found a lost child curled into a ball behind a pallet of tomato sauce, crying that the lady with the bad smile wouldn't stop whispering. I quit 2 months later. I've never gone back to that Walmart. Hell, I avoid Walmart altogether now. I don't walk down canned food aisles if I can help it. But sometimes, if I'm up late, real late, I swear I can see her in my periphery, just standing there, waiting, smiling, and mouthing something I still can't understand. But one day, I think I will, and I don't think I'll like it. The man in the cooler. I used to work in the back of a Walmart supercenter in Colorado Springs, part of the night shift crew that handled perishables. We rotated between unloading frozen shipments, restocking meat, and checking temperature logs. It was cold, repetitive work, and most people didn't last more than a few weeks. But I liked the solitude, less customer nonsense, fewer managers breathing down your neck. My job mostly revolved around the walk-in cooler, a massive refrigerated room behind the dairy section where we stored milk, eggs, butter, and yogurt. Think of it like a small house made of stainless steel and humming compressors. Inside, it was a constant 36 degrees, enough to sting your nose and make your fingers go stiff if you stayed too long. It's also the place where I saw something I can never forget. It was late January, during one of those cold spells, when even the parking lot lights looked like they're shivering. We were short-staffed that week. I think 3 people called out because of the flu. So I was alone back in the cooler, doing temperature checks and organizing a couple of pallets that had come in late. The shift was already dragging. I'd been inside the cooler for almost an hour, my breath fogging up the clipboard every time I looked down to write. I remember thinking, just 10 more minutes, and I'll go warm up near the coffee machine. That's when I heard it. A knock, coming from inside the cooler. Now I was already inside. The sound wasn't from the door or the outer wall. It came from deeper in, behind the metal racks, like someone had just knocked against the inside panel with their fist. I froze. My first instinct was to laugh it off. Maybe the compressor making noise, or the shelves settling. But then it happened again. 3 steady knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I looked around. Nobody else was scheduled to be back there. No other doors were open. Just walls of milk and yogurt and frozen breath. Then, a voice. Muffled. Dry. Like someone speaking through a cloth or from behind a wall. Help me. I dropped my clipboard. It came from the back corner of the cooler, behind a set of tall crates filled with dairy crates, the kind we hadn't moved in weeks. I should have walked out, radioed security, called a manager. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped closer. "Hello?" I said. Another knock, then cold. Still here. Now my heart was hammering. I started pulling crates away from the wall, making a narrow path through the clutter. As I moved closer to the corner, the air somehow felt colder, not just refrigerated cold. It was wrong. A kind of deep cold that made the tips of my fingers ache instantly. And then I saw it. The wall panel near the far back corner. It was slightly ajar. That made no sense. These cooler walls were sealed tight. Reinforced. Not something you could just pull open like a cabinet door. But this one had shifted. And behind it, darkness. A hole. I grabbed my flashlight from the hook on my belt and shined it through. It was a crawl space, narrow, low, and carved between the insulation layers like someone had hollowed it out. Inside, metal surfaces were scraped and dented. I saw what looked like scratch marks, and near the entrance something was scrawled in black marker. "Let me out. It's not over." I backed up, adrenaline now pulsing through every nerve. Then I heard something that made me run. Breathing. Ragged. Wet. Just beyond the crawl space. And a whisper. "He's not gone." I turned and sprinted out of the cooler, almost slipping on the frosty floor. I slammed the door shut behind me and didn't stop running until I reached the break room. I told my supervisor, Nora, what I saw. She looked at me like I'd inhaled too much freezer air. Still, she agreed to check it out, mostly because she had to. Policy and all that. So we went back together, along with a floor manager and a junior guy from loss prevention. When we got there, the crawl space was gone. The wall was intact, solid, no gaps, no shift in the panels, no marker, no message. Even the crates I'd moved were back in place, like it had reset. I stood there blinking, unsure if I'd hallucinated the entire thing. Nora looked annoyed. "You said there was a hole," she said, tapping the wall. "You high or just bored?" I didn't answer. They made me go home early, told me to rest, maybe see a doctor. Said the cold can play tricks on you if you stay in too long. I didn't argue, but I wasn't done. 2 days later, I asked one of the old-timers named Rich if anything weird had ever happened in the cooler. He got quiet. Then he said, "You mean about the guy who died back there?" My stomach dropped. According to Rich, about 12 years ago, a guy named Devon had worked the same night shift. He was last seen restocking dairy. No one noticed he was missing until morning, when his car was still in the lot and he hadn't clocked out. They found him dead in the cooler. Heart attack, they said. But the weird part? He was curled up in the corner, behind the pallets, next to a section of wall that looked like it had been pried open. Rich said there were rumors the guy had been acting strange before it happened. Talking to someone who wasn't there. Complaining about noises. Seeing shadows behind the milk racks. The store quietly settled with the family. No lawsuit, no news coverage. It was buried. I almost quit. But bills don't care about ghosts. So I stayed. I kept my distance from the cooler. When I had to go in, I made it quick. I brought headphones, tried to drown out everything. But one night, about a week later, I made the mistake of going in alone again. I needed to log a temperature reading. Just 5 minutes, I told myself. As I finished scribbling numbers on my clipboard, I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. Same rhythm. I turned and saw condensation forming on the inside wall, but only in one spot. The faint outline of a handprint appeared, then another. Then something wrote across the glassy metal. "You left me." And then the wall breathed. Not like air pushing through vents. It expanded, like lungs inhaling, then exhaled with a wet hiss. I ran. I didn't go back after that. A month later, I transferred to another department. I haven't stepped into the cooler since. I don't talk about it to the new hires. Most of them wouldn't believe it anyway. But every once in a while I hear about things. Someone losing time. Milk crates falling with no one around. That whisper. Cold. Still here. And I wonder if Devon's still waiting. Stuck in some in-between place, scratching at the walls. So if you ever find yourself working back in dairy at a Walmart past midnight, and you hear knocking from the cooler, don't answer. Because whatever is inside isn't just looking for help. It's looking for a way out.